Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandna.
And I'm Hem Khorsara. And on the show today, the United Nations Security Council on Monday adopted a US drafted resolution. This, as US President Donald Trump, of course, has been seeking to broker peace and get the deal done to end the war in Ukraine. How will things pan out? We'll bring you the latest on this on the show today.
Also on World DNA, US President Donald Trump met with his French counterpart, President Emmanuel Macron, where Macron affirmed that peace in Ukraine cannot mean a surrender of Ukraine. We'll bring you what happened in that meeting, the latest on that front, and a lot more right up here from World DNA. Let's start with the headlines.
On the third anniversary of Russia's invasion, UN General Assembly adopts two rival resolutions, one drafted by Ukraine and European countries, and the other by US, that was amended to make clear that Moscow was the aggressor.
United Nations Security Council approves US resolution calling for an end to the war in Ukraine without mentioning Russia's aggression.
French President Emmanuel Macron warns that peace cannot mean the surrender of Ukraine, even as he says talks with US counterpart Donald Trump showed a path forward despite fears of transatlantic rift.
Elon Musk condemns federal employees' failure to reply to the "What did you do last week?" email, gives them a second chance, reiterating the termination threat.
Israel says it struck two rocket launch sites in Gaza after a projectile fired from one of them landed inside the Palestinian territory.
At least 10 militants killed as Pakistani security forces launch an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Bagh area.
Berkshire Hathaway shares hit a record high after posting its largest ever quarterly profit. The stock surge pushed Warren Buffett's net worth past $155 billion.
Manchester United will cut around 200 more jobs as part of an overhaul to return to profitability. About 250 members of staff were made redundant last year in a first wave of cost-cutting measures by co-owner Jim Ratcliffe.
All right, top focus on World DNA this morning. The United States sided with Russia twice at the United Nations as they sought to avoid any condemnation of Moscow's invasion of its neighbor 3 years ago.
In its 11th emergency special session on the situation in Ukraine, the United Nations General Assembly passed two resolutions proposed by Ukraine and the US. The two votes highlighted a seismic shift in the balance of power, as earlier Washington had steadfastly voted for resolutions that favored Ukraine and condemned Russia. Washington and Russia aligned first at a morning vote at the General Assembly and again at an afternoon vote of the Security Council. Now, the resolution drafted by Ukraine and supported by many European countries received 93 votes in favor, 18 votes against and 65 abstentions. India, along with China, abstained, while the US and Russia voted against. The resolution, which won far less support compared to previous ones on the war, strongly criticized Russia and emphasized Ukraine's territorial integrity and inviolability of its borders.
Now, Washington drafted a rival resolution, but Ukraine's European allies pushed to heavily reword the US text to say that the full-scale invasion of Ukraine had been carried out by Russia, meaning Washington ultimately did not vote in favor of its own text. Undeterred, the United States brought the earlier unchanged text to a vote at the Security Council in the afternoon, securing its passage with 10 votes for and none against, alongside 5 abstentions.
The United States sincerely appreciates Council members' support for this resolution and applauds the action, the first this Council has taken in 3 years on Ukraine, to firmly call for an end to the conflict. This resolution puts us on the path to peace. It is a first step, but a crucial one of which we should all be proud. Now we must use it to build a peaceful future for Ukraine, Russia, and the international community. I thank you.
Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin has called his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky a toxic figure. In a televised interview, he said that the current head of the Kiev regime is becoming a toxic figure, quote unquote, from the point of view of the armed forces and society in general in Ukraine. Listen to this.
The current head of the Kyiv regime is becoming a toxic figure for the armed forces of Ukraine because he gives ridiculous orders dictated not by military considerations but by political considerations. At the same time, it is not clear on what they are based. This leads to unjustifiably large losses, if not very large or catastrophic losses for the Ukrainian army.
Now, further, Putin said European countries can participate in talks to resolve the conflict in Ukraine, as he sees nothing wrong with that.
We could come to an agreement with the United States, we don't mind. I think it's a good idea. The United States would have cut by 50% and we would have cut by 50%. Well, the People's Republic of China would join later if it wanted to. We believe that the proposal is good and we are ready for discussions on this matter.
The Russian president also said that he is ready for US investment in strategic minerals in occupied Ukraine. He even offered the US the opportunity for joint exploration of Russia's rare earth metals deposits, outlining a future economic deal between the two countries.
We would be ready to offer our American partners, when I say partners, I mean not only governmental and administrative structures, but also private companies, an opportunity for joint work if they showed interest. We undoubtedly have significantly more resources of this kind than Ukraine.
Now, in this interview, Putin also backed a suggestion by US counterpart Donald Trump for Russia, US and China to all cut their defense budgets in half.
I don't see anything wrong in Europe's participation in the negotiations on Ukraine. Well, probably no one here can demand anything, especially from Russia. Let them demand it from someone else.
All right, moving further, French President Emmanuel Macron met US President Donald Trump at the White House on the 3rd anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Now, Macron warned that peace cannot mean the surrender of Ukraine, but said talks with Trump have shown a path forward despite fears of a transatlantic rift.
Macron said that Trump had good reason to re-engage with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders said there was progress on the idea of sending peacekeepers to Ukraine, although the French president insisted on US security guarantees for Kiev.
Macron said that he would work with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who visits the White House on Thursday, on a proposal to send peacekeeping troops in the event of a deal. But he called on the US to back any European troop deployment as a form of security guarantees, saying they want a quick deal but not a fragile one.
We want a quick deal, but not a fragile one. And the fact that the Europeans are ready to commit to providing their response to these security guarantees, and that the American message is now clear that the United States of America, as an ally, is ready to provide support and solidarity to this approach, is a turning point for me.
As Macron insisted that Ukraine must be involved in peace talks, Trump said that the US is very close to striking a minerals deal with Ukraine, claiming that its war could end within weeks. Trump added that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky may visit the White House this week or next.
Now, after the meeting, in an interview with Fox News, Macron also said that a truce between Moscow and Kyiv could be done in the weeks to come. During the interview, Macron also addressed Trump's pledges to impose sweeping tariffs. He said that the United States cannot have trade wars with China and Europe at the same time.
As Trump and Macron discussed progress towards a truce, Zelensky met European leaders in Kiev. He called for peace this year amid mounting fears that Trump is pivoting towards Russia's stance.
All right, and for more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has sent us this report from New York. Listen to this.
President Donald Trump hosted French President Emmanuel Macron at the White House to address the ongoing war in Ukraine. Trump voiced cautious optimism for resolving the three-year conflict, suggesting that Russian President Vladimir Putin may agree to a ceasefire involving European peacekeepers. Macron underscored the importance of safeguarding Ukraine's sovereignty, warning against any settlement resembling surrender. This meeting signals a notable shift in U.S. foreign policy, with Trump urging European nations to assume a leading role in Ukraine's security and post-war reconstruction. Discussions also covered economic dimensions, including a proposed minerals revenue sharing agreement between the United States and Ukraine. President Trump said that President Zelensky may be coming to the United States as early as this week or next week to sign that deal. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Now, as the war completes its third year, Russia is unrelenting. It has intensified its deadly assaults in eastern Ukraine.
And WION's Anas Malik traveled through the fortified eastern Ukraine cities to understand how Ukraine is guarding its eastern front. Take a look at this.
We've exited Chegoyuv and we're currently in Izum, or rather between Chegoyuv and Izum. And the area to my right and to my left, this area was under the occupation of Russian forces, and it has been liberated. But there's a board that says at the entrance that says there were mines that were placed, so one has to be really careful when they're moving. It wears a deserted look, but there are checkpoints almost every 5 kilometers that are very visible, and only with proper documentation is when one is allowed inside or outside this very territory. We are in Pokrovsk region right now, and in the city of Pokrovsk, of this particular district, is where currently the infight between the Russian forces and the Ukrainian forces is ongoing. If I can just show you through on the highway, this is what the scene looks like. It's pretty deserted, both sides is snow, and you sporadically hear the use of artillery being done by the Ukrainian military in a bid to push back the Russian advancement. Time to time you can hear the use of the artillery being done. Well, we're in the base bunker, or one of the base bunkers of the 21st Mechanized Company, which is responsible for A, fighting, and B, giving logistical support to the Ukrainian soldiers here at the front lines. We're about some kilometers away from the main front lines, where the battle for Chasivyar is currently raging on between the Russian occupation forces, as they say, and the Ukrainian defense forces. And this particular company is responsible for giving both logistical support and ground support for the Ukrainian forces trying to repel the advancement from the Russian side. Anas Malik in Donbass at the front lines in Ukraine for WION World is One.
Now, as Ukraine's war enters its fourth year, Moscow finds itself in an increasingly dominant position.
And that's with direct talks between Trump and Putin excluding Kiev and battlefield momentum shifting. Russia's endgame appears within reach. More in this next report. Take a look.
When Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine in 2022, many believed he had miscalculated. Experts predicted a Russian quagmire, Western unity, and Ukraine's ultimate triumph. But 3 years later, the battlefield and the geopolitical chessboard tell a different story. The long game Putin played is paying off, and for Volodymyr Zelensky, the clock has almost run out. He's hoping that there is peace, but the odds are stacked against him.
This year should be the year of the beginning of real lasting peace. Putin will not give us this peace as a gift. He will not give it in exchange for something. We must achieve peace through strength, wisdom, and unity through our cooperation with you.
Putin's primary demand from day one was to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO. Despite loud Western rhetoric, the reality is clear. Ukraine won't be joining the alliance. Donald Trump has openly stated that NATO membership for Ukraine is off the table. The diplomatic landscape has also shifted dramatically in Moscow's favor. Trump's recent engagement with Putin excluding Ukraine from peace discussions represents a seismic shift in Western unity. Trump branding Zelensky as a dictator and his suggestion that Ukraine bears responsibility for the conflict align perfectly with Russian narratives.
Now, Russia's taken over a pretty big chunk of territory, and they also have said from day one, long before President Putin, they've said they cannot have Ukraine be in NATO. They said that very strongly. I actually think that that was the thing that caused the start of the war, and Biden said it, and Zelensky said it, and I think that was one of the reasons, one of the starts of the war.
Experts say Putin never needed to occupy all of Ukraine. He only needed to ensure it remained broken and unstable. Today, Russia controls about 20% of Ukrainian territory. Trump has said that restoring Ukraine's 2021 borders is unrealistic. A fractured Ukraine is a vulnerable Ukraine, just the way Putin wants it.
The President has clearly said that we are ready to negotiate with Ukraine, Europe, and any representatives who would like to help achieve peace in good faith, but we will stop hostilities only when these negotiations produce a firm and sustainable result that suits the Russian Federation.
On the battlefield, Russian forces maintain pressure across multiple fronts, slowly but steadily gaining ground. Despite Western sanctions, Moscow has expanded military production, while Ukraine faces critical ammunition shortages.
We will continue to improve the combat capabilities of the Army and Navy and their combat readiness as an essential component of Russia's security, a guarantee of its sovereign present and future, and its progressive development.
The West's grand economic war against Russia has failed. Despite more than 24,000 sanctions, Russia's economy grew by 3.6% in 2023 and is projected to grow by 4% in 2024. Today, Ukraine is battered and bruised. A peace deal driven by the Trump administration could happen in Moscow's favor. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Elon Musk has given a second chance to the federal employees to reply to his mail, which was titled, "What did you do last week?"
Now, renewing his termination threat in a post on social media, the tech billionaire condemned the employees' failure to meet the earlier set deadline.
Now, on Saturday, federal employees received an email from the U.S. Office of Personnel Management giving them time until 11:59 p.m. on Monday to submit approximately 5 bullet points of what they've accomplished in the previous week. Now, Musk described the mail request utterly trivial, reasoning that the standard to pass the test was to type some words and press send, and expressed his disappointment on how still many failed to do even that. He highlighted how in some cases they were urged by their managers.
Hours after the federal employees received the mail, the Department of Defense posted a note on social media requesting that its employees pause any response. It added that it will conduct review, if at all, in accordance with its own procedures. Soon, the FBI, State Department and the Office of the National Intelligence also instructed staff not to respond.
Employees at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency were told definitively to reply a few hours before the Department of Homeland Security sent a note saying the opposite. In some parts of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, staffers received instructions to draft a response but not send it. At other agencies such as the Department of Health and Human Services, employees were first given the instruction and later they were emailed to pause and watch for more guidance on Monday.
And the United States has announced fresh sanctions against more than 30 Iran-linked vessels and people, including the head of the National Iranian Oil Company, for the brokering and the sale and shipment of Iranian oil. Now, the sanctions follow US President Trump's decision earlier this month to reinstate his maximum pressure policy on Iran of sanctions against Iran. Announcing the sanctions, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claimed that Iran continues to rely on a shadowy network of vessels, shippers and brokers to facilitate its oil sales and fund its destabilizing activities, adding that Washington will use all available tools to target aspects of Iran's oil supply chain, and anyone who deals in Iranian oil exposes themselves to significant sanctions. Like Russia, Iran relies on a network of tankers that conduct ship-to-ship transfers of oil outside territorial waters to evade Western sanctions, providing the country and its military with a key source of revenue. The Treasury Department said that the sanctions targeted oil brokers in the UAE and Hong Kong, as well as tanker operators and managers in India and China. The US previously designated the National Iranian Oil Company for providing support to the foreign operations arm of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The sanctions are the second round targeting Iran's oil sales since Trump's February 4th memorandum, with which it ordered a campaign of maximum pressure on Iran. And over to West Asia, the deadlock in phase 1 of the Israel-Hamas hostage deal does not seem like it's going to be ending as of now. Israel and Hamas are accusing each other of not holding their end of the bargain, and the latest roadblock in the prisoner exchange came after Israel refused to release Palestinian prisoners on Saturday. Prime Minister's office ordered indefinite halt, citing inhuman treatment of hostages held in Gaza. 2 days later, Israel has agreed to uphold its end of the bargain under one condition. It wants Hamas to release 4 bodies of Israeli hostages without a ceremony by today itself. Hamas has refused to release any more dead bodies in exchange for the Palestinian prisoners, whose release was postponed by Israel. And this comes a day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vowed to resume war at any moment in Gaza.
We are prepared to resume intense fighting at any moment. Our operational plans are ready.
White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has announced his visit to West Asia. Witkoff says he will be in the region on Wednesday and will work to get an extension of phase 1 of the hostage release ceasefire deal. He says US expects second stage of the deal to take place and will continue participating in talks between Israel and Hamas.
All right, with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. This is World DNA. Lots more on the other side. When we come back, a full report on the rescue operation still going on to save the 8 workers trapped in a tunnel collapse in the southern Indian state of Telangana. A team of 6 rat hole miners have arrived to assist in the rescue operations. As of now, we'll bring you the latest after the break.
India could soon be facing an obesity epidemic, with alarm bells ringing, particularly for the youth. This, according to a Lancet report. We'll get to the latest on the other side.
Pakistan's long wait to host a global cricket event is finally over.
I assure every cricket fan and supporter that Pakistan is ready for the Champions Trophy.
For the first time in almost 3 decades, an ICC event is being held in the country. India's refusal to travel to Pakistan adds an extra edge to the already fierce rivalry. Catch all the drama, action and controversy from both on and off the pitch, only on WION.
In a show of jostling for power, a new Sudan coalition including political parties, armed movements, civil society leaders and the Rapid Support Forces signed a founding charter aimed at establishing a parallel peace and unity government. This weeks after the Sudanese army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan announced he will form his own technocratic government. Ugandan opposition figure Kizza Besigye appears in court in the East African nation's capital, Kampala, amidst concerns over his health following his hunger strike in protest over his detention. Besigye is facing the death penalty on treason charges. And Burkina Faso's military leader Ibrahim Traoré and the president of Chad, Mahamat Deby, officiate the opening of the 29th edition of the Pan-African Film and Television Festival of Ouagadougou, FESPACO. Watch World of Africa at these times on WION. World is One.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch. WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION. World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA with AIM and I'm Shivan. Lots more on this side of the show as well. Let's start with the headlines.
India abstains at the UNGA on resolution by Ukraine. EU that called for comprehensive, advancing, just and lasting peace in Ukraine and explicitly condemned Russia's actions. The resolution was passed along with a rival resolution brought in by the United States.
United Nations Security Council approves US resolution calling for an end to the war in Ukraine without mentioning Russia's aggression.
French President Emmanuel Macron warns that peace cannot mean the surrender of Ukraine, even as he says talks with US counterpart Donald Trump showed a path forward despite fears of a transatlantic rift.
Elon Musk condemns federal employees' failure to reply to his mail, which was titled, "What did you do last week?" Gives them a second chance, reiterating the termination threat.
Israel says it struck 2 rocket launch sites in Gaza after a projectile fired from one of them landed inside the Palestinian territory.
At least 10 militants killed as Pakistani security forces launch an intelligence-based operation in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa's Bagh area.
Team of rat miners join operations to rescue 8 workers trapped in the SLBC tunnel in the Indian state of Telangana that collapsed on Saturday.
Starbucks is cutting 1,100 corporate jobs as CEO Brian Nicole accelerates turnaround efforts. The move is part of his Back to Starbucks plan to revive sales and improve customer experience.
Manchester United would cut around 200 more jobs as part of an overhaul to return to profitability. About 250 members of staff were made redundant last year in a first wave of cost-cutting measures by co-owner Jim Ratcliffe.
Three days since the tunnel collapsed in the South Indian state of Telangana and the rescue operations to save the 8 trapped workers is still on.
6 teams of rat hole miners have arrived to assist in the rescue operations. These rat miners were involved in the successful rescue mission during the Uttar Kashi tunnel collapse in the Indian state of Uttarakhand in October last year as well.
I have come from Delhi. Our whole team has come from Delhi. Collector has called us here. 6 of us have come here and 6 more will be coming. We are a team of 12 people. In Uttarakhand, we had rescued 41 laborers. Till now, we have not received much information. As of now, we have been told that we need to go along with the NDRF and SDRF teams. It will be difficult to say something until we see the situation there.
The collapse occurred just 4 days after construction work had resumed following a lengthy hiatus. While some workers managed to escape, at least 8 workers are still feared trapped in the tunnel. Heavy seepage of water and mud has complicated rescue efforts even further, and concerns about the well-being of the 8 persons have escalated as nearly 60 hours have passed since a portion of the ceiling collapsed 13.5 kilometers inside the tunnel.
Earlier, Telangana State's Minister Krishna Rao had said that the chances of survival of the trapped individuals was very remote.
This incident took place when the formation of rock loosened and water and sand entered the tunnel. Water and muss are filled inside the runner up to 13 kilometers. NDRF, irrigation staff and others are putting in efforts to carry out the rescue operations. CM Revanth Reddy is monitoring this and giving us directions. We are not sure about the condition of the 8 workers who are trapped inside.
Now, the burden of obesity is on the rise globally and as well as in India.
A swift increase in the number of obese people shows India could soon be facing an obesity epidemic, with alarm bells ringing, particularly for the young.
As levels of obesity in India rise across all zones, undernutrition and the accompanying outcome of an underweight population is now being replaced by signs of an overweight and obese population.
Female obesity prevalence too is increasing sharply. Women had a 9.8% prevalence, an increase of 8.6% percentage points from 1990. According to a Lancet study, 44 million women and 26 million men aged above 20 in India were found to be obese, and this figure being 2.4 million women and 1.1 million men back in 1990.
Now, the issue of increasing obesity among people has been raised by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi as well. He has even nominated celebrities to spearhead a nationwide campaign against the silent killer.
Among the celebrity ambassadors nominated by the Indian Prime Minister, there was industrialist Anand Mahindra, shooting champion Manu Bhaker, actor R. Madhavan, and others include weightlifting champion Mirabai Chanu, Malayalam film star Mohan Lal, Infosys co-founder Nandan Nilekani, singer Shreya Ghoshal, and philanthropist and MP Sudha Murthy. During his Mann Ki Baat address on Sunday, Prime Minister Modi stressed the urgent need to tackle obesity, urging citizens to cut down on edible oil consumption.
Now that obesity has sparked worldwide concern, how does one define it? It's usually defined as an abnormal or excessive increase in weight due to accumulation of fat that presents a risk to health. It's a chronic, relapsing, progressive disease defined by excessive adiposity that may impair health.
India's Economic Survey Report 2023-24 has also highlighted the problem of growing obesity. The World Obesity Federation estimates that adult obesity rate in India has more than tripled, and that the annual rise in children's obesity in India is the steepest in the world, behind Vietnam and Namibia. The main factor responsible is consumption of food that is high on calories and low on nutrients. With easy accessibility to processed and packed food, people are now eating at untimely hours and a higher quantity. There's an increasing trend of eating out, restaurants and street food where oil used is refined and unhealthy. Inadequate physical activity and sedentary lifestyle have some other reasons accountable for a surge in obesity. Despite sanctions and geopolitical tensions, the European Union continues to import Russian fossil fuels in significant volumes.
Now, according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, the EU spent $23 billion on Russian fossil fuels in 2024.
This is a 6% drop in value year on year, but only a 1% reduction in volume. Notably, the EU's fossil fuel imports from Russia exceeded the $19.5 billion in financial aid it provided to Ukraine in 2024. Russia's total fossil fuel revenues in the third year of the invasion reached $253 billion, bringing its total earnings since February 2022 to $887 billion. Despite sanctions, Russia's revenues have only dropped by 8% compared to pre-invasion levels.
Now, Europe is scrambled to reduce its dependence on Russian energy, while gas imports have fallen from 45% in 2021 to 18% in 2024. The EU still accounts for 1/4 of Russia's fossil fuel revenues. Analysts suggest that tighter sanctions targeting revenue streams could cut Russia's fossil fuel export earnings by $53 billion annually, or 20% of the total revenues.
Russia has adapted to sanctions by rerouting oil exports to non-sanctioning countries using a growing fleet of shadow tankers. In the third year of the invasion, 558 Russian shadow vessels transported 167 million tons of oil valued at $87 billion. China, India and Turkey remain Russia's largest energy buyers, purchasing 74% of its total fossil fuel exports. China led with $81.6 billion, followed by India at $51.3 billion and Turkey at $35.5 billion. India and Turkey increased their Russian fossil fuel imports by 8% and 6% year-on-year, respectively. Additionally, G7 countries indirectly contributed to Russian revenues by importing $18.8 billion worth of oil products from 6 refineries in India and Turkey.
Now, a key strategy in Russia's sanction evasion is ship-to-ship oil transfers conducted in EU waters. Since the invasion began, 17 million tons of Russian oil has been transshipped via ship-to-ship transfer operations in EU territorial waters in exclusive economic zones.
In the third year of the invasion alone, 5.2 million tons were transshipped, with 43% involving shadow tankers. The highest activity was recorded in Greece, Romania, Italy and Malta. These transfers helped Russia bypass sanctions, conceal oil origins and optimize supply routes to major buyers.
Since February 2022, 87 hub tankers have been identified, with 68 still active. These vessels operate primarily for STS transfers rather than direct shipments, making enforcement more difficult. The use of shadow tankers raises environmental concerns as well, as many of these vessels lack the financial backing to cover potential spills, which could cause damages reaching $1.04 billion. Experts suggest that stronger enforcement of sanctions is essential to cut the Kremlin revenues and prevent Russian fossil fuels from funding its war efforts. And the latest round of US tariffs is putting pressure on China's manufacturing sector.
While some manufacturers are struggling with shrinking export demand, others, especially in e-commerce, are still seeing strong orders. How are businesses adapting and what does this mean for global trade? Take a look at this next report.
The latest round of US tariffs is adding pressure on China's manufacturing sector. US President Donald Trump has imposed a 10% duty on Chinese imports, affecting hundreds of billions of dollars in trade. The move is part of his broader strategy to restructure global trade, targeting allies and rivals alike. For Chinese businesses which supply artificial leather for shoe manufacturers, the impact is immediate. With many of his clients exporting to the US, shrinking demand is forcing them to negotiate lower prices.
Yes, there is a major impact. Now the US tariffs have been increased by 10%. This has put a lot of pressure on us in China, and factories are also under pressure. The traders have pressure and so do the factories, which makes it difficult for us material suppliers to do business.
Some Chinese manufacturers have relocated to Southeast Asia to avoid tariffs, but challenges like payment delays and currency risks remain. China's industrial hubs are now facing a critical question: how to sustain exports amid rising costs and shifting global trade policies. Despite rising trade tensions, China's e-commerce driven exports are holding strong. Fast fashion giants Shein and Temu have leveraged a US trade rule called the de minimis exemption, allowing shipments under $800 to enter duty-free. However, Trump's new tariff plan includes duties on these products, threatening the low-cost business model that has dominated online retail. For now, companies are continuing operations while US authorities determine how to implement the new tax policy.
I am relatively optimistic because if you think about it, the United States definitely will not produce its own clothing. Clothing is now generally produced in China or in Southeast Asian countries, and it's impossible to develop factories in Africa, right? So future prospects for the processing industry are still pretty good in China.
China has strongly opposed Trump's tariffs, implementing countermeasures to protect its economic interests. The country's manufacturing belt employs millions of workers, many of whom are migrants from rural areas. Any sustained downturn could have wider economic and social implications. Meanwhile, China's broader economy faces headwinds, including slowing growth, a property sector crisis, and high youth unemployment. The government is expected to respond with trade negotiations and support measures to stabilize key industries. But with the US-China trade war showing no signs of easing, manufacturers are bracing for an uncertain future. Business Bureau, WION, World is One.
Now, Formula One giants Mercedes unveiled their new car for the 2025 F1 season.
The W16 will be driven by George Russell and debutant Andrea Kimi Antonelli. Mercedes will begin a new era after the departure of Lewis Hamilton to Ferrari. Russell takes over as team leader alongside new teammate Antonelli. Like all other teams, Mercedes had revealed the livery at last week's F1 launch event in London, but they did that using an older model. Now, the constructors have officially unveiled the car and its specifications ahead of the new season. George Russell says the new car is a significant improvement on the car last year.
Now, the team engineers say they've focused on eliminating problems that the car had last year. The W15 was visibly slow to turn on corners. Mercedes won 4 races in 2024, 2 each for Russell and Hamilton. But the car's performance was inconsistent and the team could not compete for the constructors' title eventually, finishing 4th behind McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull in the standings. The W16 will be seen in action later today during a brief test before F1 pre-season testing officially begins on Wednesday in Bahrain.
And hosts Pakistan have been officially knocked out of the Champions Trophy. New Zealand's 5-wicket victory over Bangladesh in Rawalpindi has ended Pakistan's campaign.
While the Kiwis have reached the semi-finals along with India after Pakistan's heavy defeat against India on Sunday, the writing was on the wall for the Champions Trophy hosts and the formalities were completed by New Zealand with a clinical display against the Tigers. The Kiwis won the toss and opted to bowl first. Spinner Michael Bracewell starred for the Black Caps with 4 wickets. Bangladesh captain Najmul Hassan Shanto showed some fight with an innings of 77 from 110 deliveries. But ultimately, Bangladesh could not get enough runs on the board and they finished on 236 for 9.
Pakistan had a glimmer of hope when Bangladesh reduced New Zealand to 15 for 2, but an exceptional innings from Rachin Ravindra completely turned the game back in New Zealand's favour. Ravindra was returning from injury and scored a century on his debut in the Champions Trophy. The all-rounder ended his innings on 112 from 105 balls. Tom Latham also made a valuable contribution with a half-century and the Kiwis wrapped up the win with 23 balls remaining. That also sealed Bangladesh's fate as they were knocked out of the tournament after a second straight loss.
But the result hurts Pakistan cricket fans the most. They waited 30 years to host a global cricket tournament and within a span of less than a week, their hopes have been completely dashed. Mohammad Rizwan's side were well beaten by both New Zealand and India. The Champions Trophy has once again laid bare the glaring problems in the Pakistan cricket team.
As for India and New Zealand, they will now face each other on Sunday to determine who finishes top of Group A, while Pakistan and Bangladesh will play for pride in what will be the final game of the tournament for both teams.
All right, Indian cinema's beloved actor Shahid Kapoor, known for his unforgettable performances in Jab We Met and Urta Punjab, turns 44 today.
As the star turns a year older, let's dive into some lesser-known facts about him. Born on February 25th, 1981 in Delhi, Shahid made a smashing debut with his 2003 blockbuster Ishq Vishk. The movie was directed by Ken Ghosh. His effortless charm and stellar performance in the romantic hit cemented his place as a leading star in the Hindi film industry.
Over the years, Shahid has delivered several standout performances. His latest film, Deva, helmed by Roshan Andrews, has been making waves as a high-octane action thriller where he plays ACP Dev Ambre, and another memorable role was that of Kabir Singh.
With a reported net worth of $34.6 million, the star ranks amongst the most renowned and highest paid actors in the industry. The superstar has also faced his share of controversies. His role in Kabir Singh drew criticism for allegedly glorifying toxic masculinity. Later in an interview, Shahid spoke about the importance of embracing vulnerability in men, reflecting on societal expectations that often pressure them to shoulder family burdens.
While his message resonated with some, others called out what they saw as a contradiction given his portrayal in the movie. Next up, Kapoor is set to star in Vishal Bhardwaj's Arjun Ustara, where he will share the screen with Tripti Dimri. The film is slated for release in 2026 and fans are eagerly waiting to see how this exciting project unfolds on the big screen. Alright, it's been decades since the Japanese superhero series WION was last on TV.
But its epic stories of good versus evil still resonate deeply for these South Korean millennials who recently attended a sold-out concert hall event in Seoul. Here's more in this next report.
I think heroes are really important, especially when you're a child. As you grow up, you forget about them, but re-watching them can help bring back the memories. If the work we did can serve as a bridge between Japan and Korea, then we have really done a good job. I hope the two countries continue to get along, and I believe many people in both Japan and South Korea feel the same way.
Most of us here are office workers. And though the ticket price wasn't cheap, it was affordable. If you are an office worker with a fan spirit, it is definitely worth it.
Viewers, we are going to wind up with all the climate stories making headlines across the world. We'll step into a short break after that. Here's a wrap on World DNA. Thank you so much for tuning in.
In a show of jostling for power, a new Sudan coalition including political parties, armed movements, civil society leaders and the rapid support forces signed a founding charter aimed at establishing a parallel peace and unity government. This weeks after the Sudanese army chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan announced he will form his own technocratic government. Ugandan opposition figure Kizza Besigye appears in court in the East African nation's capital, Kampala, amidst concerns over his health following his hunger strike in protest